absolutely everything has fallen apart for Justin Trudeau, and I can't help but smile. But in the meantime, before the inevitable collapse of the Liberal Party, we're going to see a lot of hardships, such as the capital gains tax or the capital gains movement. They're now implementing it, right? So that's going to cost a lot of people a lot of money. And there's a lot of divisiveness happening in Canada right now. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage you guys to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It does really help grow the channel. And if you are already subscribed, you might as well turn post notifications on so you can actually be notified of upcoming videos. Without further ado, let's get into this. So we've got to look at the polls here. You see the Conservatives are still sitting pretty much exactly where they were last week. 211. Last week they were at 212 seats. Bottom line 183. Top end 232. Everything's still looking really good there. 99% likely most seats and 99% likely of a majority government. So no real changes there. But what really is changing in Canada is the culture. This is a great video to kind of bring together what's really happening. So this is a Mississauga. A man goes off at a Cineplex employee for not playing India's cricket game. Let's take a look here.
Make a ball sometime, what about sometime? You don't want to see a ball.
I'm just doing it if you guys kindly please put your phones away. We're gonna deal with it, okay? Thank you.
You don't understand what is going on.
I know. That's another thing.
You can see that. It's crazy, you know?
We can walk
We
this
take
whole
it
way,
like,
you know.
we make it a baseball game and then you will realize that how it feels.
Yeah, I mean, baseball's North American, so that's why they seem to air that. And cricket is not really that popular in North America. Nonetheless, yelling at employees because they're not getting your way is not really the way of doing that. And there's a big update, a huge update for these Palestinian protests, but we're not talking about them. We're talking about the Israeli protests. Was the biggest one we've ever seen in Canada. Toronto's Walk with Israel sets a record with over 50,000 people who marched up Bathurst Street. That is a lot of people. And you know what's kind of nice about this is all the Canadian flags that are embedded in here. Super awesome to see. When you see these Palestinian protests or these Hamas protests, whatever you want to call them, you don't see any Canadian flags. In fact, they would rather burn the Canadian flag because they want to bring their culture here. And that's not going too well for them back where, you know, their homeland type of thing. Speaking of homeland, you have a third of BC residents are considering leaving the province. Pretty wild. Let's take a look at this CTV video.
Well, if you're considering life in another province because of rising costs here in BC, you're not alone. New data shows more than a third of British Columbians are thinking about a major change. Our Craig Krause is following this for us. He joins us live from New Westminster. Good morning to you, Craig. That is a lot of people who might leave BC, and it seems it's most likely affecting younger residents.
Absolutely, and I'll break down the demographics here, Carrie. So it begins with Gen Zers and millennials, where about half of those in this study that responded to this survey said that they are considering or seriously considering leaving the province of BC for cheaper housing. And around 40% of those aged between 35 and 54 are also considering leaving BC for cheaper housing. But it's the generation on top of that. It's 55 plus. That's where we're seeing the majority of them saying they're going to stay put here in BC and not seek further housing. And it breaks down by region too. So getting in a little bit more into this Angus Reid study, what they say is that 42% in the Lower Mainland and 41% of those in the interior are more likely to stay or say that they are seriously thinking of leaving the province than those in Metro Vancouver or those on the island and the North Coast. And when it comes to housing responsibility, about half say that the BC NDP has not done enough when it comes to housing supply here in the province for affordable housing, and 24% say that they are doing an adequate job when it comes to housing. Carrie?
Okay, Craig Krause joining us live this morning. Thanks for that, Craig.
Yeah, life just is not affordable in BC. The housing cost, the housing price, everything, none of that makes absolutely any sense at all. So I don't blame people for wanting to leave BC. I mean, I've said this before and I'll say it again. If Premier Danielle Smith were to ever personally invite myself and my family to Alberta, I would immediately, I mean, that would be enough for my wife. You'd think, right? To be like, oh, the premier said we should move there, to you directly, then yeah, we I guess we'll have to do that. So Danielle Smith, if you're out there, if you're listening, if you're watching, please send the invite personally to me, because my wife needs that little bit of motivation so we can pack up and go to Alberta. All right, now let's move on to Chrystia Freeland here. Today, our Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland portrayed a government plan to raise the capital gains inclusion rate from 50% to 66%. She's weaponizing the entire country amongst each other. Listen to this shit carefully. We are fucked.
But I would also like to ask Canada's 1%. In fact, Canada's 0.13% to consider this. What kind of a Canada do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a country where kids go to school hungry? Do you want to live in a country where a teenage girl gets pregnant just because she doesn't have the money to buy birth control? Do you want to live in a country where the only young Canadians who can buy their own homes are those with parents who can help with the down payment? Do you want to live in a country where we make the investments we need in healthcare, in housing, in old age pensions, but we lack the political will to pay for them, and choose instead to pass a ballooning debt onto our children? Do you want to live in a country where those at the very top live lives of luxury, but must do so in gated communities, behind ever higher fences, using private health care and airplanes, because the public sphere is so degraded and the wrath of the vast majority of their less privileged compatriots burns so hot? Every Canadian across our great country needs to ask themselves these same questions, because the stakes could not be higher.
All right, so this woman is obviously super fucking dumb. It doesn't make any sense. First of all, the 0.013% or whatever she just said, they're not watching this going, you know, you're right. You bring up a lot of valid points. I will gladly pay more taxes. People aren't even pissed off at the super rich anymore because the super rich provide jobs. Go figure. They're pissed off at the government, and the government is trying to pass the buck onto the super rich and trying to make the super rich seem like the god-awful worst people in the world, when it's the government that is literally ruining everything for everyone here in Canada. It's kind of interesting. Like, normally, you've had in the past a lot of people, there's been public outrage towards the super rich, right? And now it just seems like no matter what the government does, they're to blame. Kind of funny. Let me know down below in the comments what you think about that. Next up, we have Justin Trudeau, who says, right now, a multi-millionaire in Canada could pay a lower marginal tax rate than a nurse. Yeah, I don't know about that. We're changing that. We're asking the wealthiest few to pay a little more to pay their fair share. So that's kind of crazy, because when you look at the comments, nobody likes you, go away, how much you're going to pay on all your investments. No one's saying that, oh, that's a great idea, let's tax the rich, right? That was right from Justin Trudeau's official account on X. Nobody is replying to that going, yeah, good job, buddy. The rich deserve to pay more. Not at all, because it doesn't matter how much money they take from the super rich, how much money they take from 40 plus million people living in Canada that are taxpayers. The government is going to piss away all of that money on these social programs that are doomed to fail, because the government, the current Liberal government, doesn't know how to manage said money. And that's why we're in a super big economic crisis, because they don't know. They could get $1 trillion, and they're still going to piss it away, because first things first, they're going to line their own pockets. They're going to spend millions, if not billions of dollars on, you know, illegally funneling money into Ukraine, but guising it as humanitarian aid. They're going to give themselves a bunch of raises. Like, our prime minister, for crying out loud, is worth millions, if not over $100 million. That does not make any sense at all whatsoever. That should never, ever happen. Kind of crazy. But let me know down below what you guys think about how Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are trying to pin everything on the super rich, and it's really not working. Next up, we have Liberals take the first steps to increase the capital gains tax. Let's take a look at this video.
Today, the Liberal government plans on taking its first legislative step towards increasing inclusion rate on capital gains. CTV's Colton Prail live this morning with more on this. So, Colton, the capital gains tax, these changes really going ahead. This is sort of carved out from the budget specifically to take a look at this.
Yeah, it's become a political wedge. Not surprising that the Liberals are pushing forward with this. We knew it was coming when they announced it with the budget and then separated it from the actual bill itself. What is interesting, though, is yesterday when we heard from the finance minister, this is exactly as it was presented in the budget. That may not be surprising. Why wouldn't it change? Well, there has been consultations over the past few weeks, especially with doctors and entrepreneurs, because there has been a lot of pushback on these changes, concerns that it could lead to lower productivity, that could send high-end business talent to the States looking for other options. And on the doctor's side of things, a lot of concerns for what it means for family physicians and those physicians who own their own practice, because they won't be excluded from these changes. And so they'll end up paying a higher tax rate when they sell their practice at the end of their career. It's concerning for the CMA. They're worried that we could see an influx of sales of practices prior to this tax coming into effect on June 25th. They're also worried it means doctors who were looking at going into the GP field or owning their own practice in the future may now look into other avenues of medicine as a result. That's, of course, particularly concerning given the healthcare shortages that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, the ripple effects of this are potentially pretty brutal, Colt, no doubt about that. So it's unpopular, could cost the Liberals votes down the road. Why didn't they try to water it down? A lot of people wondering that.
Yeah, they're trying to frame this as an issue of tax fairness, and we heard that from the Deputy Prime Minister yesterday, talking about this is what they need to do to pay for Liberal programs like the dental care program or the National Food Program, $10 a day daycare, and they're framing this as a small number of Canadians, the wealthy Canadians, who will pay a little extra to do their fair share. That's how the Liberals are messaging this, and they're doing that to try and incentivize most Canadians who won't be impacted by this to see it as them choosing to not raise taxes on the majority, to provide more services, to try to make life more affordable while finding the money from those who others will say can afford it. That's how this is being pitched by the Liberals. The issue is, and where they might open themselves up politically, is if it doesn't work exactly like that, there will be a lot of examples that the Conservatives can pull up in Parliament, or that can bring people in front of a microphone, of doctors or electricians, of small business owners who maybe don't feel like they're part of the rich that the Liberals are describing, but who end up paying these capital gains taxes. And it could make the government look out of touch, or it could make the policy look ineffective if it's taxing people who feel and sound and look like everyday Canadians who are also struggling financially.
Okay, it's going to be an interesting week, because this is revealed or unveiled in Ottawa, and they do the Ways and Means motion first and then vote.
Canada is already in a healthcare crisis. Like, doctors are in a massive shortage. Personally, my family and I don't even have family doctors. It's absolutely insane. We've been on a wait list for several years right now, and no luck yet. So kind of crazy how now we're going to even have fewer doctors and these private practices, because people just don't want to pay that money. Businesses should be profitable, and now there's not that incentive to make money and to grow a business in Canada, because there's like a ceiling. No one's going to want to pay 60% tax. Like, that's absolutely insane. What do they call California? California for this is one of the many reasons why. Kind of wild. Anyways, while I've been filming this, there has been some breaking news. Andrew Scheer just posted this on X. Breaking news. Conservative motion passes. All files on Trudeau's $1 billion green slush fund will have to be sent to the RCMP. Over $120 million in taxpayers' money abused. Over 180 conflict of interest at the fund. This is 9 years of Justin Trudeau. So it seems like the RCMP is actually going to be investigating Justin Trudeau. That is absolutely awesome. Something that we haven't really seen get pushed through ever. And speaking of being pushed through, we really need to figure out who the names are of these 11 MPs that are bought, paid for, manipulated by foreign entities. Let's take a look at this CTV video here.
for the report say it's up to law enforcement to decide if any MPs broke the law. In a statement, the RCMP says in part that it can, quote, confirm there are investigations into a broad range of foreign interference in Canada, including matters which intersect with democratic institutions. The RCMP, the statement goes on to say, though, will not provide comment whether there is an active criminal investigation into any parliamentarian. The report also states China and India are the most prominent perpetrators when it comes to foreign interference in this country. So should Canadians know who these parliamentarians are? Jennifer O'Connell is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Public Safety Minister. Michael Chong is the Conservatives' Foreign Affairs Critic. And Alistair McGregor is the NDP's Public Safety Critic. Hi, everybody. Good to have you here today. I appreciate you making the time. Ms. O'Connell, I'll start with you. Your government, as we said in the introduction, has said that it's up to the RCMP or law enforcement more generally to investigate and then pursue charges if it's warranted. But we heard from the director of CSIS this week who said because of the difficulty of presenting intelligence as evidence or turning it into that in a court of law, there are other avenues through which this should be pursued. For example, somebody can be determined not able to run in a nomination or kicked out of caucus. Why is your government not even allowing for that?
Well, in fact, we are allowing for party leaders to get security clearance and be able to read the full unredacted report, which will provide them with additional insight. But the same challenges around intelligence to evidence also exist if there was to somehow be a list of names released without context and ensuring that any sort of intelligence is also corroborated. We think that the rule of law in this country and democracy relies on the fact that there needs to be that evidence, there needs to be that independent investigation. But we are allowing for leaders, and I believe the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, as well as Elizabeth May, the Green leader, have agreed to have their security clearance continue and read the full report, and they can make also determinations if it impacts them.
Sure. So my question, though, is about what your party and your government is doing, and I have questions for the opposition about what their leaders are going to do in a moment. Your leader has read the unredacted report, does know who the MPs are. So far, Canadians have no evidence that your party or your government has pursued any other investigation about the possibility of those MPs or those senators acting as foreign agents. Why not?
Well, I wouldn't say that's accurate in the sense that, as the ministers confirmed, the director of CSIS as well, is that this information is in the hands of law enforcement and it's shared there. And
it's
if
actually
there
not.
is
There's no confirmation of that. The RCMP won't confirm that.
No.
And not everything has been referred according to the EDSACOG report.
But this is
Oh my
the point
goodness.
that if there is intelligence that has corroboration and leads to evidence, that there are mechanisms and there are laws in this country to deal with that. In addition to that, what my colleagues here and I'd like to acknowledge the hard work that Mr. Chong and Mr. Mr. McGregor is doing on the additional enhancements with C-70 to deal with the CSIS Act, which would actually give us more tools in information sharing in situations like this. So there is action being taken, but it's important to remember that intelligence is like a piece of a puzzle, and that it's the entire puzzle that forms the evidence, and it's something that we have to stay focused on.
Well, just to be clear, the RCMP actually, prior to C-70 and a whole lot of other things that your government could have, or in the case of some of the advocates should have done, asked for legislative means to be more able to turn intelligence into evidence. That is not part of the new legislation that you introduced, and the RCMP commissioner told me that one-on-one. As far as the bar that is required in order for your party to act at all on the possibility of foreign agents, why is it an evidentiary bar? Why is it that there has to be a conviction or the RCMP make that determination? The Prime Minister had no problem when it came to accusing India of being behind the murder of a Canadian citizen to rely simply on intelligence and say in the House of Commons that that was the case.
I don't think anybody suggested that the party can't take measures when it comes to serious allegations, and I don't think anybody suggested that it would require criminal charges, but there are party mechanisms to do so. It's something that would have to be based, though, on corroborated evidence and intelligence, and a determination can be made. But these pieces are also moving as more information becomes available. And I think that it is incumbent on everybody to take this seriously and to look at processes to put in place measures when there are serious allegations.
Just very quickly before I move on to your colleagues, am I to infer from that that your party has investigated this, that you have looked into the possibility of there being foreign agents and determined that there are not? Because I'm not clear. You at first did say it has to go to law enforcement. Now you're saying there's other mechanisms. Have you pursued any of them?
No, what I said earlier was that to the call
She's walking
to
back her
names
words.
without caveats, without context, is something that in this country we rely on the rule of law. When it comes to party politics and the nomination process and the green light process,
nobody's been kicked out. So I'm assuming that means your party has not determined anyone to be guilty of what this report says.
I don't think that's an accurate assumption to make. And I think
so what is accurate?
Well, I think what's accurate is that those who have the security clearance can review the information, can determine if there is another process or more work needs to be done. But making these hypothetical accusations of who is or isn't involved without context and corroboration of intelligence to evidence, I think becomes very problematic in that becoming the party process in this country.
Okay.
So you're just never going to get a straight answer from these people. It's absolutely criminal, and this is why we need to just disband the Liberal Party almost. And they're doing it themselves. Like, Canadians aren't dumb, and it's not like we're goldfish. We have memories. We're able to remember at least 24 hours, and they say the same shit every 24 hours. So we're on a constant cycle of corruption, of stupidity. These people are like, they're their own worst enemy. No one listening to these Liberal appearances on mainstream media, these interviews, the press conferences, question period, nobody is going, wow, I think now that they've said this very particular thing in that very particular way, they've won my trust as a voter, and I will support them. Not a single time has that happened in recent years. And that's why you're seeing just the fall of the Canadian government, the fall of the Canadian Liberal Party. But that's where we're going to end the video. I'd love to know what you guys think down below in the comments. On your way out, I would like to encourage you guys one last time to smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't yet already, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.